Thank you, Chairman Smith, for your leadership, and thank you, Congressman Swazi. And I'm also very honored to be on the same panel with the Chairman and Dr. Dorji and Dr. Tom Farr. The religious freedom in China really has reached to the worst level that is not seen since the beginning of the Cultural Revolution by Chairman Mao in 1960s. I will only maybe give you like 5 different aspects or the symbols of those points to show that why it has become the worst since the Cultural Revolution. Especially after the 19th Party Congress, the Communist Party has taken some unprecedented measures in cracking down on all independent faith groups. So it's not only just targeting Christians or Catholics, as Chairman Dorji just mentioned. It's been targeting for any groups that shows any independent spirit, such as, of course, the Tibetan Buddhists, the Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, as Chairman and Congressman Swazi just mentioned, and Falun Gong, of course, and many other groups. So because of the time limitation, I'm asked to pay particular attention on the persecution against the Christians. First, we have not seen a level of persecution really since the end of Cultural Revolution on the number of religious institutions and churches that has been targeted or shut down. Since the February the 1st, when the newly enacted regulation on religious affairs was taken effect, in Henan province alone, according to our documentation, the crosses of the churches between 4,000 to 6,000 of churches, the crosses were being forcibly demolished or burned, as you can see from these latest photos. And a number of house churches, the independent, unregistered house churches, we're talking about the thousands, were being shut down. And last week, we just received a number in one particular province, one particular county within the Henan province, which is called the kind of Jerusalem of China, with perhaps the largest number of Christians are populated in that province. At least the estimated number of Christians in that province alone is over 10 million members. So in the one county called Xiayi County, among the 140, this government-sanctioned, supposedly registered and protected churches, 90 of them were already shut down. And a number of course, the crosses were being demolished and burned, and the believers were even being detained for simply showing up in defense of the crosses. And ironically, many of these churches, even the government-sanctioned churches, when the cross was allowed to continue to exist inside, the church wall, on the church wall, and they were forced to put the portrait of Chairman Mao and Chairman Xi Jinping on both sides of the cross. And in the beginning of every worship service, the choir of the church has to sing a few communist revolutionary songs, praising Communist Party before they can sing their worship of God, songs. And the number of Chinese clergymen, I mean, these are even previously registered, approved by the government-sanctioned body, the Three Self-Patriotic Movement and the Chinese Christian Council, are forced to go through another round of examination. And the first criterion they have to pass as a legitimate clergyman is whether they can publicly pledge they will follow the party's words and the party's path. 听党话，跟党走. And listen to the party's words first and follow the path of the Communist Party first. And these slogans are being hanged around the church. I mean, even in many Catholic church, on the wall, on the door, on the entrance door, there is a slogan that says, "Listen to the words of the party, follow the path of the party." So how can you have a real independent faith? You're the believers, as a Christian believer, we are taught, to obey the command of the Lord, to listen to the word of the Lord. And essentially the Communist Party wants to impose themselves as the Lord over the church. I think that tells maybe one of the essential reasons why these churches are being targeted. The second symptom we can see why this is the worst time of religious freedom in China is for the first time since the Cultural Revolution, the Communist Party now are implementing a policy to mandate the Chinese citizens of the faithful, religious citizens, to sign a form to renounce their faith. So we have produced, the documentation showing the villager chief of the Communist Party chief, and were door to door forced the believers to sign a prepared form, claiming that this believer were misled by evangelists and into believing Christianity. And now, after a few weeks of self-examination and studies, political studies, they realized they made a mistake. They pled they will never believe Christianity anymore. So this has not happened in the past. The number three symptoms to showing the unprecedented persecution is the burning Bibles. The last time under the Communist Party rule, when a Bible burning ceremony happened was 1967, when Chairman Mao's wife, Madam Jiang Qing, organized a 1 million Bible burning ceremony in the square of Shanghai. This is the first time we have seen, government officials went into the church, confiscated and all their Bibles and hymn books and Christian materials, and piled them on the street and started a Bible burning ceremony. So this is also unprecedented. And the number four signature of this unprecedented persecution shows that not only the Communist Party is doing this persecution in its own borders, and now we have evidence showing that the kind of persecution and the methodology our Communist Party is using in China is being exported to the neighboring country and regions. And last week we have received a documented report showing at the Kachin Autonomous Region, the Communist Party officials, at least 3 or 4 of them were sent there in the Kachin minority areas inside the Burma border and direct a campaign almost word by word, including the forced demolition of crosses from the rooftop of the church building in the Kachin, in the Burma area, including arrest and so-called Sinicization, arrest those church pastors for interrogation, and they also disband 23 Christian schools that was started by Pastor Zhang Cao with whom I had been befriended for over 25 years. And this year, he was sentenced to 7 years imprisonment as a Chinese-American pastor. And he's still suffering imprisonment as we are talking now. So all the Chinese house church Christians who are volunteer selflessly as missionaries teaching Chinese and education in these schools were being rounded off. All of them were being imprisoned in the Kachin Autonomous Region, and then last week they were handed over to the Chinese authority, and at least 8 of them are still being held in the Chinese prison as we are talking. So these are the measures that really taken unprecedentedly, again, has not been seen since the end of the Cultural Revolution. And how to tackle this, you are asking me to provide some recommendations. So I have listed a few recommendations at the end of my written testimony. I will just highlight a couple of them, and then I will add a few. First of all, I think I would recommend, besides the sanction that put by under the Global Magnitsky Act, I hope a member of Congress should also really, and the U.S. Department of State and Treasury should list more names of high-rank officials responsible for severe and systematic religious persecutions as defined by the user for sanctions. Because to sanction just one kind of middle, lower rank, one official is not enough. There are so many of those persecutors are at large. So we can work with the member, with Congress and the administration to produce more lists. And secondly, I urge Congress or through CECC or other mechanisms to target, to kind of create a watch list, a religious persecutors watch list, because we have a prisoner of conscience list at both the CECC and the user website. But we also need to create persecutors, to really let them know they are being watched. Let them know their family members, their children, their wife, and their other colleagues should be ashamed of those officials taking the persecution. And I also want to add a few recommendations. One of the ways that we have seen the Chinese Communist Party have adopted really very efficiently, in a sense, that targeting the religious minorities is through their internet control, through their censorship of the internet and smartphones, as you said, because that's what they did when they are implementing this, Uyghur, this 1 million group of Uyghur Muslims. I mean, the first thing when they are targeted is to check their smartphone or cut off their kind of internet access. I think even as the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton even said, the kind of highway for internet freedom, for religious freedom, is to promote internet freedom. So unfortunately, the BBG under the current policy only spent less than 1% of this budget on the internet circumvention. If we just appropriate 10%, I think it will scare, not only scare, but bring the true freedom for the religious practice. I think that will be very effective. I would urge Congress to, take concrete measures to urge the BBG or mandate BBG to do more on the internet freedom. And another thing I really want to urge Congress to do to help is those religious freedom advocates had paying heavy price during the incarceration, especially during the kind of inhuman torture and interrogations. And we have found that in the Chinese Academy of Police, the Police Academy, they have a department specifically making studies on the kind of torture and interrogation techniques that they are using for mental torture to break the will. You know, we have seen many friends, the human rights lawyers, Christian leaders, you know, like such as Gao Zhisheng, who, by the way, disappeared again over a year now without knowing where he is. And Attorney Wang Yu, Attorney Li Heping, Attorney Zhang Kai, and the other attorney Wang Quanzhang, who is still disappearing for almost 3 years. They had been subject for enormous torture and under this kind of techniques. So I think it's warrant Congress to have a targeted report to study and make recommendations on these departments. And finally, I want to call Congress to also investigate, you know, those Chinese American citizens that are they are American citizens. They're being used as a tool, willingly or unwillingly, to spread propaganda, lies, deceptions. And we have evidence showing that they are buying radio stations on the border of U.S. and Mexico, for instance, on the side of the Mexico border, and so that they can broadcast daily propaganda, deception, lies to the Chinese populated areas along the California coast from Los Angeles to San Francisco. I think it's a warrant particular investigation because these are people managed by, you know, by the Chinese American citizens here in the U.S., but they get their funding from the Chinese Communist Party propaganda fund. So these are some of the recommendations I would recommend the committee to take a look. Oh, by the way, I want to ask the chairman to grant me to submit as part of the congressional record for the letter the 426 Chinese House Church leaders signed urging the Chinese government to stop the persecution. And they signed with their real name and their church affiliation in most really in bold and unprecedented way. So I want to.
But by making it public, does that put a target on their back?
Yes, they know. Pardon me, Chairman.
By making it further public in a congressional hearing, does that put a target on their back under Xi Jinping's repressive police?
No, because they already made their names public. So they want to make a statement. They're not afraid. It's time for them to speak up.
Testimony and read it aloud, and that person was brutally retaliated against for doing so. And I mean, again, this is the regime that most Americans still don't have a sense is barbaric. It uses torture as a means pervasively against its own people, and certainly against religious believers. But if you think it should go in without objection,
yeah.
I'd like to yield to Dr. Tom Parr.